Hello and welcome, guys. This is Wylker, and after a long hiatus of doing spotlights, I am back with a spotlight of thermal expansion. Now, in this video, I'm just going to focus specifically on the thermal expansion aspects of the, thermal expansion family, we can call it. And in a couple subsequent near future videos, I'll cover some of the other aspects of this mod and some of its sister mods. But without further ado, we're going to jump into thermal expansion. Now, many of you are familiar with thermal expansion, and I'm going to do a complete overview here as opposed to a recap of recent changes, just because it's been so long since I spotlit it, I don't know. But what we're going to talk about is every aspect of thermal expansion, along with some examples. Now, this is not a tutorial for this mod, so I'm just going to highlight all the blocks and items and stuff like that. If there's a request for it, we can try to do something like a tutorial later. To just basically introduce thermal expansion, it is a technology mod. Oh, and by the way, if you're looking for the version and download links, they'll be down in the video description. Thermal expansion is a technology mod. It deals with power generation and ore and material processing and fabrication, along with some other neat stuff. So let's first talk about the most important part of any basic tech mod, which is power generation. Thermal expansion gives you several options for power generation. They're called dynamos, as you can see here in front of me. The first we're going to talk about is a steam dynamo, and this produces electricity or redstone flux using a combination of water and some kind of furnaceable, we'll say, heat source. So in this case, I've got blocks of coal in here, and very quickly, thermal expansion has a really neat user interface, and you've probably gotten used to seeing some of this in some other mods lately, but thermal expansion was really the first to have a dynamic world-changing type of user interface. What I mean by that is that there are little tabs here, and while some of them just give you information like how much power is outputted and the maximum and the energy stored for this particular dynamo, and some of it's just information-based, you'll also see some things like a UI that changes the redstone interaction of the blocks. And on some of the later machines, you'll see things that impact the way that the faces of the block get used. So in this case, I have redstone control set to high. And what that means is that the machine is not going to be on until it receives a redstone signal. You can also have redstone ignored or have the machine in an on status until it receives a redstone signal. And that's what low means. So in this case, we have it on high. We have it full of fuel and full of water. And by simply applying a redstone signal, it is now going to start generating steam, and then it'll consume that steam to generate redstone flux. Now, you can also pump steam directly into a steam dynamo in order to generate RF, but thermal expansion doesn't possess the capability to generate steam on its own. So this would be the way to work it if you did not have a steam generating mod. The next dynamo is the magmatic dynamo, and this one works very similarly to the Buildcraft power generations, where you pump in a fuel, in this case it's lava, and then once you turn it on, it'll begin consuming that lava in order to generate electricity. The next is a compression dynamo, and this is the first one that's a little bit different. Compression dynamos use a combination of liquid fuel, in this case liquefied coal, as well as water in order to generate RF. And each one of these, Each one of these dynamos all has a maximum power output by default of 80 redstone flux per tick. Now we'll talk about a little bit later how to increase that. The next dynamo here is the reactant dynamo. And this one uses a combination of energized glowstone as well as explosive compounds. So gunpowder, TNT, stuff like that to generate power. And again, your maximum is 80 RF a tick. And then finally, we have the innervation dynamo. And the innervation dynamo uses pure redstone sources to convert them to RF. So just depending on what mod packages you're playing with and what other mods you have installed, there's probably other things you can use in these dynamos in order to generate RF, but that is the basic stuff that can be done internally from, is that music? What's going on here? That can be done from inside thermal expansion. The next items I have over here are the energy cells, and one of the big concepts that a lot of mods have, but that thermal expansion stays pretty true to, is the tiers of items. So for example, the basic energy cell, which can store energy, is redstone flux, is called the leadstone. And you'll see up there in my little Wylker tooltip, it has a maximum capacity of 400,000 redstone flux and can input and output 200 redstone flux per tick. As we increase our tech level here, our tier here, we get more storage as well as more transfer all the way up to the resonant energy cell, which holds, it's a lot of zeros. What is that? 80 million redstone flux and 32K in or out. And it's basically just an upgrade system as you progress through the tech trees and get more resources and the ability to fabricate more advanced things. You get more of these options. So that being said, let's talk about some of our machines. The first machine we have is a redstone furnace, and this operates very much like a traditional Minecraft furnace, except it uses redstone flux instead of coal or wood or other fuel sources. And it can smelt ore, it can cook food. I believe it uses a very low amount of RF compared to your normal conversions in order to cook food, but I haven't actually done the math on it. And this is a machine where I just want to really quickly talk about two of these other interface tabs. I mentioned earlier there's ways to increase the capacity or the output of your dynamos, and there's some other options too, and those come from this augmentation tab. And you'll notice here that I have 3 augmentations or augments in this machine already. And it is the integrated servo mechanism, and that allows us to have automated output. There is a redstone circuit, which lets us have redstone control. And finally, the modular framework, which lets us have reconfigurable sides. And that was the other option I talked about earlier. This configuration tab allows us to, on this very basic machine, select sides or faces of the block for input, which is blue, and you can see where it lines up there, and output, which is orange. I just wanted to highlight those 2 things because some of these are going to have more advanced configuration options and different kind of augmentations, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. Next is the pulverizer. The pulverizer is your first step for ore multiplication in thermal expansion, and it's used for some other things. And this also introduces the first secondary output slot. Again, this isn't a tutorial, but just be aware that you're going to have some resources that you'll process through here, and you'll get secondary outputs, and then you'll use those for either other recipes or possibly for some other kind of higher tech level things in thermal expansion. But if you look at the configuration, you'll notice we now have a new color option here, and that is the output for the secondary resource that you get through processing. Okay. We have our sawmill, and a sawmill is really cool. Not only will a sawmill give you higher level of wood log to plank output, but it also allows you to recoup some of your resources from some items. So for example, if you were to throw a bed into a sawmill, it would let you recoup your wool. You've got some stuff like sawdust that you can get from fence gates, redstone from note blocks, lets you get your wood back from pressure plates, things like that. So it's almost like a deconstructor for wooden items and some plants and stuff. Just, I don't know, something kind of different. But it does give you, as I mentioned, where are they? Somewhere around here there should be logs. Yeah, so you get 6 planks per log instead of 4. So we have our induction smelter. Now the induction smelter is the first really unique machine that I think thermal expansion had. And this is for doing alloys. It allows you to put 2 items in and get an output and a secondary output. So you'll see again, we've got some different colored tabs here in our configuration tab, or different colored sides. And there's a lot of recipes for this. So for example, there's some more ore multiplication where you can use rich slag to get 3 ingots out of a ore. There are some actual alloy recipes like pulverized obsidian to give us different kinds of glasses, hardened glasses. And so there's all kinds of neat stuff you can make with this induction smelter or alloy smelter. The next machine is the magma crucible. And the magma crucible very simply will take items and melt them down. So you can melt down most notoriously, or I guess it's probably not that big of a deal anymore, but netherrack will melt down and give you lava as an output. And there's a couple things you can melt. You can melt glowstone dust, you can melt obsidian, you can melt coal. This is how you get that liquefacted coal that we used earlier. Glowstone, blaze rods, cryothium is used for some thermal expansion recipes, stuff like that. Liquid ender, or resonant ender, excuse me. By the way, thermal expansion does add several types of new fluids into the Minecraft world, including things like destabilized redstone and the liquid cryothium and some other things. So the purpose of these is varied just depending on what exactly it is you're trying to accomplish. Once you have something into liquid form, you would then use it in a fluid transposer. The fluid transposer is used to either insert items into containers, fluids into containers, or take fluids out of containers. So, for example, you could use this to fill water buckets and then pump your water buckets out to go somewhere else to another machine in order to use them in a recipe or to place them in the world, things like that. The glacial precipitator is one of my favorite blocks because it lets you make snow and snowballs and ice based just off of water and power. You see when I turn this on, it's going to start using up my water and it's going to start making snowballs. And it's just neat because really getting snow and ice is kind of a pain in the butt usually. I don't know. Maybe that's just my opinion, but I don't know. Anyway, I think it's neat. It's a neat, necessary machine that kind of solves a problem that maybe wasn't foreseen when snow and ice were introduced. The igneous extruder is a solution for the old lag-inducing cobblestone and obsidian generation machines that we used to do in vanilla back in the day. What it allows you to do is pump in lava and water, and simply, in this case, once again, I have it set to high redstone control. But once I turn that on, it's just going to start using up 1 unit of water and lava and making cobblestone. Now, if you set it to stone, it goes a little bit slower and I think uses a little bit more resources, and it'll make smooth stone for you. And then finally, we can set it over here to obsidian. And it goes even slower. You see it's significantly slower. And then it will make obsidian for you. Again, there's some neat augments for this. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Okay. One of the most useful and happy blocks in any mod is the aqueous accumulator. And based off having nearby water sources, okay, you can then, with no additional power or input or anything, get a constant stream of water. And this is, again, just a nod to the fact that water in Minecraft is infinite, so why not reduce it to a block to make things simple? Finally, we have two newer machines. The phytogenic insulator allows you to use a thermal expansion fertilizer, as well as some kind of a food item. Let's see if we can put more seeds in here. And let's turn that to ignore. And then what it does is it takes redstone flux, fertilizer, and your food item, and then we'll go ahead and process it. And this is, again, a machine that has an occasional additional output. And you see there's lots of things you can do in here. You can make vines, you can make cactus, you can increase your cocoa beans, carrots, all kinds of good stuff. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to get a wheat and wheat seeds. And so this is a completely renewable machine that allows us to just farm food in one block using power. The energetic infuser is not as useful as I think it used to be. I believe the main reason this block was introduced was in order to charge modular power suits, which I don't even know if those have really been ported. But essentially what this does is it lets you charge up an item. So in this case, I can grab this resonant flux capacitor, and it's very slowly going to begin, very slowly going to begin charging it up with power. And you can see there it's already pumped over 2 million. It's going towards 3 million redstone flux into the thing. So that's actually a little bit quicker than I thought it would go. But you can pump items in and out of it. It won't move it to the output block till it's full, so you get some automatic recharging of items in here if you want something to work like that. Speaking of, the resonant flux capacitor is an item we'll talk about in just a little bit, and it's essentially just a portable energy cell. Okay, next we're going to talk about some of the storage items that have been added for thermal expansion. What I have here is a row of strong boxes, and strong boxes are just an upgradable chest system. You see it starts with 2 rows, then you get 4, and 6, and finally, what is that? 8? Yeah, finally 8 rows of storage. And in addition, there are satchels that go along with it. So you've got 4 levels of satchels. You got 4 levels of satchels here. And one of the neat things about the strong boxes is that they can also be upgraded to be secure. And the C of H mods have their own internal friends list. You can allow it to be public access, restricted to just your friends, or yourself only. These secure strong boxes are also not accessible via pipes. Nothing can be pumped in or out of them. Finally, a really neat little factoid, I guess, about these strong boxes and satchels is that they can also be enchanted. So I've set up a little enchantment room here. And you can see, here's your basic resonant strongbox. And again, it's got 4 rows of, 8 rows of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, of 9. So you've got 72 items worth of storage in here. But if I were to take one of these strong boxes, let's grab one and throw it into an enchanting table and use my highest level enchant, I've now got a resonant strongbox of holding 4. And that is going to give us still 8 rows, but of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 columns worth of items. So a pretty good increase there, almost 50%. Same deal with the backpacks. Oh, that didn't take it out of the frame for me. That's sad. The satchels, excuse me. So I've got a regular satchel, which has 4 rows of items in it. But same deal, if I go ahead and hit it with a holding 4 enchant, now I've got 8 rows. So you've got a really huge capacity for upgrading your portable storage with this thing. Hello? Oh, there we go. So, enchantable containers. Awesome. The next type of storage items are called caches, and caches basically work like barrels. And again, there's 4 levels of storage for them. The first is the 10,000 item cache, and you see it has these really neat little interface components that show you how full it is. That one's half full. Then you've got your hardened cache, which holds 40,000. Your reinforced, which holds 160,000, and finally your resonant cache, which holds 640,000 of an item. And that's kind of all your storage options. Again, it's upgradable. It's in a 4-tier system. Very easy to understand and use. Now, what I have over here is some of the miscellaneous blocks that are included with thermal expansion. And the first one is called an autonomous activator. And the way an autonomous activator works is that you can put an item into this grid. It has some configuration options as far as whether you want it to left click or right click, if you want it to sneak, if you have multiple items, how you want it to use them, and finally, if you want it to aim straight ahead, up, or down. Again, it has some augmentation slots, some redstone control, and some configuration slots. Now, in this case, what's going to happen is I'm going to simply set this block down in front of it and turn it on, and you'll notice it's going to use my pickaxe, and it's going to break the block. Just like if you were to use a pickaxe on a block in front of it, it's going to do the exact same thing. So literally, any item you can put in here that can be left-clicked or right-clicked or whatever, it will attempt to use for you. The next item over here is a nullifier. And a nullifier is a nod to the old block of lava in the ground in order to get rid of stuff, because it uses lava in its construction, and anything you put into it is going to go away. And you notice you can't shift-click things into it. You have to drag things into it. I guess that's to prevent accidental nullification. You can pump things into it if you so choose. It can have an input slot, and then anything you pumped into it would be destroyed. Finally, what we have over here is the Terrain Smasher. And the Terrain Smasher works a lot like you'd expect. Once you put a block in there and it's active, it will break it. Now, if it's a piece of terrain that drops an item, it will pump the item out, and it will end up in not in adjacent inventories. It has to be pumped out of the Terrain Smasher using mods which will not be named right now. So you can see I can put stuff here and it'll just break it and pump it out, and it'll end up wherever you want it to. There are some crafting things we're going to do with thermal expansion, and these are things I don't think are used a lot, which is kind of a shame. The first is this machinist workbench. And this allows you to do a couple things. It's kind of a internal storage crafting table. So you'll see here I have 64 cobblestone. I have a ghost pattern in here where I can set this up. And then if I click on it, it's simply going to make these stone stairs for me. The other thing you can do, and I've already done this here, is you can save this ghost pattern to a schematic. So here you see I have a schematic set up for stone stairs. I can hold shift and it will show me the schematic, the output for the schematic. And then you can save it, right? So this is saved here. Now I can put the schematic in and import it, and it'll pull it right back up for me. Now, the reason you would want to do this is for this next machine called the cyclic assembler. And what the cyclic assembler will do is take a schematic, and as long as it has the resources for it, it will automatically make whatever it is supposed to. What's really cool about the cyclic assembler is it can also do liquid crafting for you. So if you have an item that requires water or lava or whatever, it can use an internal liquid buffer in order to do that crafting, which is neat. And it's very fast. I know you guys saw that. It's extremely quick. Here's an example where I have pumped, where I have set up a schematic for this signalum blend, which takes pulverized copper, pulverized silver, and destabilized redstone. So I filled this reservoir up with destabilized redstone, and now when I activate the machine, it'll go ahead and make that blend for me. So it's a combination of physical items and liquid in order to make this recipe. There's a couple of new to me items that have been added to thermal expansion. They're sponges, and they work, I think, like souped up versions of vanilla sponges. And they will absorb water. And then, if you use your crescent hammer here, you can pick it up, and it shows you that it is a sponge with 8 buckets of water in it. Similarly, there is a lava sponge, a magmatic sponge, that if you place it correctly, will soak up all that lava and store it for me. 8 buckets. An oldie but a goodie, and now with newer and prettier design options, is the glowstone illuminator. And these can be configured using the multimeter. It has an interface that lets you set the mode and set what's going on with it and set the color off an RGB scale. And you can see I have a whole spectrum of colors here. You can see what kind of the range are, as well as new designs. So if you wanted flatter ones or dots or buttons or bars, those are all built in by default inside of thermal expansion. We're going to talk about some items. Now, I've used the crescent wrench a little bit. Your crescent wrench is your basic interaction tool for thermal expansion. It lets you do things like pick up blocks and save their configuration. It lets you activate and deactivate things. Like, for example, I can turn these lights on and off with it. You've also got the battle wrench. Now, the battle wrench is the exact same thing as the crescent hammer, except it also gives you a pretty good attack damage bonus, +7. So basically, their functionality is the same, it's just one's also a weapon. I also used the multimeter here just a minute ago, and the multimeter is a tool that can measure energy on a thermal expansion power network, as well as interact with a lot of the blocks from a configuration standpoint. One of the newer items is the flux igniter, and I'm going to talk about it at the same time I talk about one other kind of neat, maybe underused feature of thermal expansion, which is rock wool. You've got regular wool and rock wool, and as many of you probably know, if you set wool on fire, it'll eventually, not only will the fire spread, but you'll eventually get your block destroyed, like that. Whereas with rock wool, it works a little bit more like netherrack. Rock wool will not catch on fire. Fire will not spread from rock wool to rock wool. And in addition to that, the fire will not destroy your block. So gives you kind of a neat alternative to, it does not burn indefinitely though, like netherrack does. It'll eventually burn out. Speaking of, The flux igniter lets you set fires at a really long distance. You saw I did one really close there, but I bet if we come out here... Oh, where's all my animal friends? Oh, well, let's see if we can make one. Oh, look, there's a cow. So it's got a pretty long range on it. Let's see. There we go. Ah. There we go. So you can set things on fire from afar. Okay. It's enough fun with murdering innocent animals. All right. So, I talked a little bit earlier about augments. Here's kind of your basic augments. These are the things that are going to give you automatic ejection, redstone control, side control, things like that for your machines. In addition, there are several other augments. Oh, look, there's our flux capacitor. There are several other augments that are useful out there. Let me do this real quick. Okay. So this augment, the cryo-coil regulator, is basically going to allow us to have more fuel efficiency. So if I were to plug this in here, this would let this steam dynamo use less fuel and less resources in order to make its power. The other dynamo augment, is the flux amplifier. And these allow you to have much higher power output. Now, my understanding is that these only work if you have the other ones installed. So, for example, for this augment, you'd have to have level 1 and 2 installed in order to get level 3 to work. Let's take this one out. And that's the way all these augments work. If you don't have the highest level of them installed, they won't work. The gyro server feedback is for your machines that have secondary outputs, and it gives you a much higher chance for secondary outputs. Rotating. Next, we have our space-time flux unifier, and this just is going to give you a faster speed machine at the cost of more energy used. And this can be used in any machine that has a speed component to it. Next we have, and finally for our augments, we have the pyroclastic generator. And if you remember earlier, I was showing you the igneous extruder that can make cobblestone, stone, and obsidian, but it does it kind of slow. What this does is give you much greater output per tick. Whereas one tick earlier gave me 1 obsidian, 1 cobblestone, or 1 stone, you can see here you can get a stack or half a stack or 16 obsidian. And it also reduces the amount of water that you use. You'll notice also there's a line there that says requires a resonant machine. I didn't get too much into that, but all these machines all have upgrade levels as well. So you're going to start out with a basic level of each machine, and you're going to have to upgrade through them in order to fully unlock the capacity of each machine. Finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about as far as the items and augments go are your florbs. Florbs are items that are used in conjunction with fluid transposers, and there's 2 kinds of florbs. There is a regular florb and a magmatic florb, and magmatic florbs are for hot items, and those allow you to make portable, one-use reproductions for fluids. So, for example, you can have any of your new fluids, as well as water, steam, lava, any of those things all within a florb. And then you can do fun stuff with them like throw them, and then it will place that liquid in the world wherever you throw it. Steam is one of the funnier ones because steam is a light material. Oh, here. And so steam, when you throw it, goes like 5 ever. That'll eventually hit the ground and release a giant column of steam into the air, but it's neat. Okay, so one of the heart and soul items of thermal expansion is the Tesseract. Tesseracts are really cool. They start off looking like this, and they're configurable. You can have channels and saved channel names. They have redstone control. They are also allowed to be set up to send, receive, or both for items, fluids, and energy. And actually I have all three of those examples set up now. Please ignore these ducts that are not a part of thermal expansion at all. Just pretend they're not there. So for the first Tesseract down here, I have it set up to transport water. And you'll see here when I turn it on, my Tesseract over here begins receiving water and pumping it into this nearby tank. My second example here involves a strong box full of cobblestone, and once I turn that on, you'll start seeing the cobblestone shoot out of our little Tesseract here, and it will end up coming into our second Tesseract and landing in our new strong box. Finally, our third Tesseract is set up to this creative energy cell, and once I turn it on, you'll see that if we come over here to our previously empty energy cell, that it begins filling up with energy. You have to be a little bit careful with how you do these Tesseracts because you can't have like fluids going two directions at once, and you don't want your items to get stuck. And actually, something neat happens here. Let me show you real quick. If you have something set up, like for example, these cobblestones to get pumped out, and they don't have a valid destination, it'll bounce them right back to where they came from. It doesn't destroy them or anything. And again, ignore the neat-looking pipes that connect these things. We're going to pretend those don't exist. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about, and these are super new to me, are our plates. And currently there's 3 types of plates, but I've heard from Skyboy that there's a couple new ones that are going to get implemented soon. And these are all configured. They're placed in the world and then configured using the multimeter. We're going to come back to the translocation plate last. The redstone plate projects a redstone signal into the world. And you'll see here I have it set up to project 4 blocks in front of me with a strength of 15 and a duration of 40 ticks. That's 2 seconds. It has lots of directions. It can go forward, down, forward, backward, left, right, down, or up. In this case, we're going to have it shoot forward 4 blocks, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. And it creates a block in the world that sends out a redstone signal. So you see there, by standing on it, I light up my glowstone illuminator for 2 seconds or 40 ticks. If I wanted to, I could extend this out. I think, where's that one? Yeah. Extend it out, and now it's back lighting up that light in the back. Because of the way it operates, if we were to say place blocks on either side of it, it would hit both of them there. So real flexible, really cool, fun. Now this is an impulse plate. I want to talk to you a little bit about the impulse plate. The impulse plate basically imparts momentum to things that walk across it. And it can be used for entities like people. Okay. So see that? How it gives me momentum, shoots me off to the side. Now for things on the ground, pumping this thing up all the way doesn't make a huge difference just because there's a lot of, I guess, friction between what on the ground and the entity. But it can also move items, I think. Yep, see that? Which has its own kind of fun uses. And it can also do things like, move cows. But I don't know if you noticed, there are more settings on this. In addition to a force setting, there's also an elevation setting. So for example, if we were to raise this 15 degrees up in the air and place a cow on it, you'd get launched in a most impressive fashion. And it can go up to 60 degrees. Which means you can also have cow catapults, cowapults. I don't know, maybe somewhere like in the 35 range. Let's see what kind of range that gets us. Oh, that's great. So that is the impulse plate and the redstone plate. The last one here is by far the most fun, I think, and this is the translocation plate. By configuring it for distance and direction, you can then step onto it or put items on it or other entities, and it will move you around. See, that shot me to here. That one shoots me to here. This one, the plus means up, so that's going to take me up to this platform. I've got one here that'll take me back down. And finally, one that will take me down into my secret base down here near the bedrock of the world. Oh, there's my impulse plate. Now we're teleporting everywhere. And guys, that's pretty much it. Like I said, I'm going to follow this up with some videos on some of the sister mods to thermal expansion. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching. This has been Wylker, and thanks so much. Hopefully we'll see you next time.